Okay, thanks, Dana.
Okay, and do you see that it's recording? I can't see on the...
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
All right, so as I mentioned, people can, if you haven't already, kind of share your name, state, and organization if it's not already in the name. In the chat box, so we are expecting about 20 people on this call today. So if you haven't already, you can share your names and kind of glance at who's in the call with us. So we have Candy, we have Jose, I see some new ones, Lauren. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Okay, so we're gonna start off with a very quick poll because we do want to kind of gauge when people are going to be having virtual conferences and kind of a time frame for how crucial these resources are to you all. So if you could go ahead and launch the poll, Danae.
So it is launched, and I see that we've got about half of you who have responded. So just if you haven't responded to that, that kind of gives us a clear picture of really the urgency around connecting today. And we'll keep it open for about 10 more seconds. I think we're missing just 3 people, and that might be the 3 USB-C folks. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll and share those results. Can you see those results? Miriam?
I cannot. Can anybody else chime in? Can you all see the results?
It looks like 45% of folks said they have some time. So that means between April and June of 2021. 36% said soon. So that's September to December. And 18% said around the corner. So January to March.
Awesome.
Nobody's been there already. So that's interesting.
All right.
Okay, definitely good to know. Thank you all. So here are kind of a couple of things we're going to go over today, and we do want to, open this up to you all. We thank you so much for registering, for joining us today. We took a look at those kind of questions or things that you all wanted to learn about and share, and these were the most prominent topics that were outlined in that registration. So we have technology, communications, funding, conference formats, attendee engagement, troubleshooting in real time, and continuing education. So some of these we've heard that there's more of a kind of a desire to hear about. Some of them were just mentioned once or twice. Is there any of them in particular that you all want to start with? We are going to try to cover all of these topics, but if there's something that you all want to start with, we can kind of jump to that. I will say that conference format was probably the most popular, and that's what we have next on the slides. So if that's okay with you all, we can do that, or if there's any other one that kind of stands out, we can jump around, whatever you guys feel.
So does anyone feel opposed to starting off with talking about technology? Not seeing a no, so let's start with the first question. What platforms are you all using for your virtual conference? This is a peer sharing learning opportunity, so let's hear from you all. What's working for you? What have you came across?
And we know that, for example, some of you maybe have not gotten to this point in your planning. Maybe some of you have. Maybe some of you have attended, virtual conferences. I know we have. So maybe sharing from that perspective, what have you maybe participated in, and how did those go?
I'm seeing in the chat, I don't know, Miriam and Danae, if you're also seeing it, I'm seeing a few folks starting with Jose saying Zoom. A few people have said Zoom, also WebEx, Zoom and Vimeo for videos. Candy said Microsoft Teams. That's really, I'm kind of intrigued. Someone, and then Trisha also said. So I'm curious a little bit about if you're willing to say how Teams has worked for you. I think most of us have kind of had a Zoom life for a little bit. I mean, those of us who work virtually kind of already were Zooming, but it's been a Zoom world. So probably a lot of folks have had experience with that, but I'd be curious to hear. I mean, we certainly use Teams, but it's usually for 3 or 4 of us, not for a whole, you know, for a larger group. So I'd be curious if anybody who is using Teams.
And I just want to add, if you're in a place where you can talk, that would be really helpful. We have some folks that are actually on the phone and not able to see the chat. And so if you could actually unmute and share, that would be really helpful. So I'm just going to call out people who chatted. Monica, can you go ahead and unmute and talk about some of the platforms that you've experienced? That'd be great.
Hi, everyone. This is Monica. We actually hosted our first virtual conference right when the pandemic hit. We were supposed to have our live conference, and everything started shutting down in our state. So we switched from live conference to a conference, and we had to learn really quickly and on the go. So we did use Zoom. We found that that was the easiest one for everyone to have access to. Everyone, audience seemed a little bit more familiar with Zoom, even though we did explore other settings, including Microsoft Teams. And we also, during that time, we also had an app, like a conference app that we used to load up the videos. But we found that with Vimeo, it seemed easier process to load up the videos. So ever since then, we're learning more about different things that you can do with Zoom that we're excited to use for our next conference, including the breakout sessions.
Nice. And so I have a question for you. For Vimeo, you use that for more of an on-demand? Is that what you used for more of an on-demand conference, or was it live, or?
We, due to some of the technical difficulties that we encountered during our live conference, we did record the sessions, and so Vimeo was the place where we hosted the video so that attendees could go back and watch some of the pieces that they missed.
Oh, interesting. Nice.
And that was easy to embed. Once we had it in Vimeo, it was easy to embed it into our app and our other platforms that we were using for the conference.
Nice. Very nice. I am familiar with Vimeo, but I never even thought about using it for hosting videos. We typically have used YouTube to do that. But yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing, Monica.
I've used YouTube as well, but I have found that Vimeo has a lot more privacy settings. And for our speakers, because we had to do everything that day of and get those agreements for speakers to record them and to allow participants to watch the videos and stuff. Some of the speakers were not too on board for their videos to be in the internet for everyone to see. So Vimeo has a lot better settings for that. And then you can go back and erase them as they've been posted as soon as you can or as soon as you want to.
Monica, can I ask you, was the cost really high based on the number of videos you placed?
Actually, it wasn't. We actually keep using Vimeo. The cost initially was we ended because of the length of videos and the amount of videos I uploaded. So that's how they bill you. And because of the amount of videos that we were uploading at one time, we ended up paying. Sorry, I don't know what happened. So it's an annual fee of $500, but you can, like, for example, you can open it and upload all your videos. And then if you find that you're not going to be using it as often as possible, as you can cancel your like annual setting to a more affordable setting, and you get some of that money back. We ended up not having to do that because I really like it, and now we're uploading a whole bunch of videos or other things. But it's actually pretty affordable.
I have a question, Monica. So that means that for all the videos that you're sharing for your conference, you're the one that's actually doing the sharing during the virtual conference, right? Using Vimeo. I only ask because like for my case, I have all the speakers share their own videos using whatever platform they're comfortable with. That way we don't have to spend money, and then they usually have to send me the videos in whatever format that they want, so they can still be shared with participants, but not outside of participants.
Yeah, I found that since we were the ones recording them, it was an process for us to host them on that Vimeo app. When people send me, now that we are using it more, and some of the files for the videos are huge and people have difficulty sending them, and found that once I upload them to Vimeo, I can just send people the link. It lives there like in YouTube. And so people are able to watch it. So when streaming it, it's actually also a clearer streaming session because you're doing it yourself. And actually there's a setting, there's a free Vimeo setting. So I would recommend, if you're intrigued, check out their free app, and maybe upload a small video, try it out and see if it works for you for what you need. And that way you can find out before you actually make the purchase.
Great advice, Monica. Thank you. I would love to hear from Candy, Trisha, and Amy. You seem to have used like Microsoft Teams, and is it Hova? I'm not familiar with those, with that platform. Would love to hear more about how you've used those platforms for your conference.
Hi, this is Candy. We're not at the conference point yet. We're a smaller group. So we originally started with COVID with Zoom, and then we, I don't know how else to say it, we got hacked basically. So then it was prohibited throughout the United Nation to use it. We did receive an upgrade, and I presented on Zoom, which I think everybody's saying you get a lot more participants. It's pretty user-friendly. I've also used WebEx, but what's recommended is Microsoft Teams. So we have our meetings, our huddles, and I just taught my first virtual childbirth class series, and it seemed to be pretty user-friendly with the clients. So the moms are able to download the app for free. And there's also a way that you don't have to. There's no charge. They just need a phone and Wi-Fi. And then one came from their phone and one actually had a laptop. It was doable. It was pretty convenient. It's a hard topic to teach virtual. So we're still learning the tricks and tools to it. But it's pretty straightforward, similar to Zoom, but what I'm hearing is maybe allowing less participants. I think Microsoft Teams was adopted and recommended here because we're a healthcare facility. I think someone else had noted too there from a public health department. So HIPAA, confidentiality, all of that, the guidelines have to be considered. So, so far I'm diving in brand new, and it's kind of what I have to work with, and it seems to be going okay.
Nice. Did you say there was a limit on the number of participants for teams? Oh, I think you're muted. There we
Yes. So I was told that was a difference between the two, but I can't tell you what the max is on Microsoft Teams, but I know Zoom, when I've asked others, like, what platform are you using, how's it working, and a lot of them say, like, I presented to a classroom and there were like 30 participants that I could see, WebEx and Zoom, whereas Microsoft, I'm not sure if it has that capability or large capacity.
Yeah, and I know Zoom, you can probably get up to 1,000 depending on the type of plan you have, for that platform.
This is Tricia Cassie in Vermont, and I'm in a similar situation where I work for a health department and we are only using Microsoft Teams. I do not have access to initiate a Zoom meeting, though I can attend one. And we've been using them for our virtual classes, and Microsoft Teams has worked well for that. As far as the number of participants, I believe that for the meeting option, if it was like an interactive meeting, that there may be a limit on it, and I don't remember if it's 250 or more. But then there is another feature of Microsoft Teams Live, and that one, I believe, puts everybody in a view-only kind of thing where it's not a participatory, except perhaps for chat. And that one has a much larger audience. I think it can be a huge number. I don't remember what it is, so I don't want to say it. But Microsoft Teams is also, it's replacing Skype for Business, and it is part of the Microsoft 365, the Office 365 environment, and they are tweaking it, and they know that Zoom is out there and has all those nice little boxes like the Hollywood Squares things so that everybody can see everybody, and Teams is going in that direction. They're just not there yet. So that's what I've heard about them. We've used them for our virtual classes, and they've worked quite well. People are able to view our screens easily. We have an interactive PowerPoint that we can show them with some videos and lots of photos, and we can also get on the screen and just talk with them. I work with childbirth educators also, and they are teaching through, Zoom and other things. They're doing their childbirth classes. So it's possible. It's a bit of a stretch, but it works.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tricia. I had no idea that Teams had that capability. Like, I had no idea. We're a very small staff team. We use Microsoft Teams in our day-to-day work because we are a virtual staff. And we only have 8 people. I had no idea that it could hold up to even 50 people. So to hear that 250, that's pretty amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline with the Oklahoma Breastfeeding Resource Center, and I just wanted to add, so of course we do, just like everybody, tons of trainings and all that stuff. So it's pretty much what our organization is doing breastfeeding trainings for the state. So we've done, of course, Zoom, we've done WebEx, but regardless, one thing that we have done and what we may do going forward, when you have even your own presentation or guest presenters, is we had them record their voice on their PowerPoint, like just in the PowerPoint option, just record on each slide like what you're talking about, and then just have one person kind of manage all of the presentations. But of course, that person who's presenting is there to answer questions. So it kind of alleviates like any technical difficulties that could go wrong. It just went really smoothly when we did it. When we did it on WebEx, so it was me and my boss were presenting a segment. And so she just did both of the PowerPoints, but I had all of my stuff recorded, and it was flawless. Because we had like a set time, like, okay, we had this segment of the conference for like an hour. So there was no going over, it was pre-done. She had all the presentations on her laptop, so it wasn't switching between sharing screens. So I just wanted to you can do that on any platform, obviously, but it was just kind of something we tried and it worked really well. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share about platforms or even format? I think we've touched even a little bit on like the live stream versus the on-demand. If anyone's used any hybrid, you know, formats, that'd be really great to hear about as well. We recently did Nbcc Reimagined, and everything was sort of on demand, and we're happy to share kind of like tips and tools that we use as far as like the process of like how we went with launching that. But if anyone else wants to share, we're happy to take a step back and let you all share. We're also happy to share if that's helpful.
I can mention our experience with Facebook Live. I don't know if I don't think anyone's brought that up yet, but we actually participated it was an event called Prego Expo. We were supposed to be there as vendors actually, representing our program for my company, and we were supposed to actually go out to Dallas. That obviously got turned into a virtual meeting, and it was really interesting because the first segment that we had, we went live. So we did some video training with the equipment that we were showing our moms. It was breast pumps, and they got to ask questions live, which was super cool. We were fielding those questions as we were doing the training. And then we had a taped segment that we submitted, and then they posted on Facebook at different intervals that made it look like it was live. So I thought that was interesting. And then they uploaded it onto YouTube after the event so that anybody that wanted to catch it afterwards could go to YouTube.
Nice. And I see some folks in the chat saying, yes, Facebook Live is great. So it looks like some folks have some experience with that as well.
Hi, this is Lisa from New Hampshire. I have a question for those of you who have used pre-recorded sessions through either Teams or Zoom. Did you have any issues with like the bandwidth or your recorded session playing smoothly as it went through your platform?
The one thing I can speak about a recorded session, we do those a lot. For Teams, it seems to be pretty smooth. We do a lot of like small group conferences and seminars in Teams. But Zoom was a little bit complicated for us. Like we taped the meeting, but then we couldn't find it. So I don't know if it was that we didn't sign up for a certain level with Zoom, but we were just trying to find the recording and it wasn't, we had some trouble.
Were you able to find it, Lauren?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I know I definitely have had that problem before, but I have that problem more when it records on my local computer than if it records onto the cloud. Yeah, I do monthly conferences, so they're usually up to 100 people. The biggest one I've done is 700, and they're all on Zoom, and yeah, they're all on Zoom, and I record all of them. So I do them live, and then I record them, and I share that. But I have had the problem before where I can't find my recording, but it's usually me having to go searching through my computer.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Jose, when you do your trainings or your conferences, are you live the whole time or are you streaming a pre-recorded video through your Zoom?
Yeah, I'm live the entire time. So usually I'm the person that puts the conferences together, and I'm technical support as well. And I have an MC, and then I have my speaker or my speakers. Some of these conferences go up to 6 hours long. And then some of them are about 2 hours, but they're live the entire time and they're being recorded. By the time I have the recording, I usually send it to one of my volunteers who's an editor, so she can edit it and make it look really smooth and brand it as well.
And just for the Zoom recording issue that happened, your Zoom account gives you the option to save directly to the cloud or to your computer. So sometimes it's just going on the back end and updating those settings.
For those of you who are using Zoom, are you using Zoom Webinar or Zoom Meeting?
I use both. I mostly use Zoom webinar, but if the speaker specifically requests that they would like the participants to be able to have a conversation, then with them, then we use Zoom meeting. But I use that one. I will say I use Zoom meeting far less than I do webinar.
So we, the USBC staff team recently participated in a virtual conference for Collective Impact through the Collective Impact Forum. And what they did, they used Zoom as the entire platform. And what they did was they used Zoom webinar for their plenary sessions. So there wasn't much interaction in the chat and things of that nature. But for breakouts, they used Zoom meeting. So that's instead of using the actual breakout rooms. So that's something else that, something that I took away for a virtual conference that could possibly be used as well.
And actually, I just wanted to add, this is Monica again. One of the things that I've learned that is super helpful that we didn't have the first time around, but we will have this next time around, and during our meetings, is that we have, so our task force has 2 separate Zoom accounts because you can only host 1 meeting on Zoom at a time. And one of the accounts, we set it up as the call button on our website. So if anyone's having technical issues, they can either click on that button and they'll connect directly to Zoom, or they can give us a call, or of course they can email us. So we're just giving them a lot of options to be able to reach support, and we'll have someone answering the Zoom, basically like a person there that can walk them through accessing some of the slides or managing the website or any other questions. So we'll have 3 different systems that people can reach us at.
Nice. I see a question in the chat from Lisa. She's asking if Zoom webinar is included in a professional Zoom account. Jose, do you know? You seem to be very familiar with Zoom.
I do. Okay, so what I think is that I think it should be included with the professional. I think we have a business account, but we have the one that lets up to 500 people come into the webinar. So I think it should be included with the professional, but I'm not quite 100% sure. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Lisa, if ever you want to get together, I can share my email with you, and then I can help you like figure that out just by looking at your account by sharing our screens.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so it looks like so this topic has really stemmed to a lot of the other topics that we're going to touch on. Did we want to kind of switch slides just to get more ideas? I do see your question, Camille, and that is one of the things we're going to touch on. So troubleshooting, which some of you have mentioned. How do you deal with these different instances? So people asked about minimizing distractions. We know we're all, at home, we have pets and family members. Also, like Camille mentioned, staff needed in assigning tasks. How many people are kind of needed to run a virtual conference? And then also tech help. So like Monica mentioned, how to assist your attendees, but then also kind of thinking, how do you assist your presenters if they're having issues? So what have you all, we can go one by one or whatever you all want to share.
I have answers for all of these that I use at least specifically for my conferences. For minimizing distractions, I tell all my attendees that we're going to record the session, and we're going to go ahead and share it with them after it's available, usually like within a week after it's edited. That way, in case they miss anything, or they have to attend to their children because they're in school, or they have to, go to a doctor's appointment or something, they don't have to worry about not actually missing that portion. They'll still be able to get it, and they'll still be able to get their continuing education as well. Staff needed an assignment. I usually have myself as tech support, and for tech support for the entire conference, and specifically for the speaker, I have an Emcee. I have one person who helps and answers any questions that's coming about accessing the webinar. Someone who is answering voicemails, and then someone who is monitoring the chat box, and someone who is monitoring the Q&A. And then we usually ask the speaker, how do you want to do questions and answers? Do you want to do it as they're coming in? Do you want to do it after your presentation? And who would you like to field these questions for you? Do you want the MC to field them? Do you want the tech support to field them, or are you going to field them yourself? Different speakers have different needs. Yeah, and tech help for presenters, it's, as I said, just usually me and someone else does attendees. I have this thing called like a parachute plan. So if anything was to go awry, I have this whole sheet where let's say the presenter loses their internet access. I give them a sheet that they have to print out, and they usually have to show it to me, or they have to show that like they wrote it down, where they have the phone number, the webinar ID, and the participant ID already. And at that point, if that was to occur, then the person monitoring the chat box already has preset questions that they're going to start shooting in there, and I take over the webinar and tell people, give us 5 minutes, we are going to figure this out. Please go ahead and participate as these poll questions are being launched. It also helps with continuing education.
My mouth dropped open. So that is so awesome. That is so awesome. I wonder, Jose, would it be possible for you to share your parachute?
Yeah, let me bring it up, okay? I call it a parachute plan. For all of you who have watched the Hunger Games, I'm really into them. So I always say, like, if something goes bad, a fireball has been launched at me, I need a parachute sponsors. My boss thinks it's super funny. Let me go ahead and continue the conversation, and as I bring it up, I can go ahead and let you know.
Awesome. And you could also email it to us, and we can actually share it. If you don't mind sharing it with the group, we can also email it out to folks as well.
Okay, I would just have to change some of the names on there.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, go ahead. And then let me get approval from my boss as well, and then
yes,
if she says yes, I'll go ahead and send it out.
Good. Do all the things you need to do, and if you can send it and share it, you can email it to us, and I'm gonna just chat where to email that.
And I'm so glad that was recorded, because that was a lot.
Yeah, we might be able to make it up based off of what you just said. So that's awesome. Thank you for that.
Okay, so there's a lot of things in the chat box as well. So let me kind of read those off and kind of get us updated. So Jacqueline said, always do a test run. Nina agrees with that. They've been doing test runs. So Monica, you agree with Jose. Those ideas are really amazing. So thank you for sharing. And then Jose, can you repeat the different roles you assigned? So just, we do have the recording, and we can, kind of write this all down for everyone, but we do have a question in the chat box. If you could just quickly repeat the different roles.
So tech support, which I usually take over, that means tech support for the entire conference and for the speaker themselves. Then you have a person who is monitoring the email address, where all questions in are coming in as for access. That same person usually is responding also to voicemails from people who cannot access the conference. Then you have your MC. The MC usually has a pre-written script, like a script that's already written out for them. They're just going off of that, and who I'm tech support, I am looking that this person's actually following it. You have your actual speaker, you have someone monitoring your chat box, and then you have someone monitoring the Q&A.
Nice. And
so
I see.
I would say at least 6 roles. If you don't have staff to have 6 roles, then depending on how big your conference is, you can assign some of those roles to like 2 people. So like for conferences that are up to 100 people, I can usually 2 people, 1 person can have 2 roles if they're good at both of them. If it's a 700 person conference, then I'm gonna get volunteers.
Mm-hmm. And then Monica did add, in addition to assigned roles, having a backup in case one of your teammates has an emergency is always helpful. So definitely.
I really like that idea, Monica, having a floater, like someone who's just kind of lying in wait to help out where needed. That's a great idea.
Wow, was there anything anybody else wanted to add? I know this was, we did share a lot of information. And we can move to the next slide, or we can, if anybody has any other questions.
Or things to share, things that have worked for you. All right, I can move on to the next one.
Okay, so this one is attendee engagement. So keeping your attendees engaged for a full conference. And this is kind of taking into consideration that people have conferences spanning over a couple of days. So there was a question about how do you keep people coming back to all 2 or 3 days of a conference. Also thinking about breakouts, thinking about virtual networking, having people kind of network virtually where you're not in front of somebody. You can't really organize a lunch or something like that where people start talking to each other naturally. What have you all seen? How do you all handle those?
So we do a huge, conference like everybody every year, and we've already started planning. We're planning to do, like, it's in the agenda to have either 15 minutes or so set aside that just literally says like networking. So I don't know if we're gonna maybe do like breakout rooms or just have the chat open, like a Q&A, if people have questions regarding just like this, like virtual stuff or whatever the topic may be, or stuff that they've heard in the presentation. And kind of the same thing like with speakers, like allowing that, a separate time for questions, since it's not in a traditional conference room. You can at the end of a presentation like ask questions for 5 minutes from people in the room. So just kind of allocating that into the agenda for your 2 or 3 day conference, that is just, it can be questions that have either pre-submitted or just kind of like a networking time. So that's kind of what we're planning to do. So we'll see how that works. Our conference is in February, but we have other things coming up as well.
Nice. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have attended any kind of virtual conferences? I know the one that Danae mentioned that we attended did have breakouts, and some of those, are helpful. They kept them very small, 3-4 people. And I kind of liked that setup. How did you like that, Danae or Camille?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt like the breakouts were like there were enough breakouts where the attendees were kind of spread nicely, and so you could have a nice amount of people in one breakout, and then within those breakouts they would use the breakout rooms within Zoom to break you out into even smaller groups. So basically, it was kind of like if you were sitting at a table in a breakout room. So you might be in a breakout room with 30 or 40 people, but then they put you into rooms with 5 people, so you could have much deeper conversation. And then they bring us back into the big group, the big breakout room to share and report out of like what we discussed. And I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Monica, you said social media is a great way to engage the audience during a conference. Do you want to share more about that?
Yes, during our conference, or even actually during most of our events, we encourage attendees to just post themselves, pictures of themselves, of what they're doing while they're, in the virtual conference. So we tried that during our first conference, virtual conference, and it was really fun to see people taking selfies of themselves eating or nursing, which was great because we're, Breastfeeding Coalition. Or we even had one where you could see her feet where she was in the bathtub, but you could only see her feet. And it was just really fun to just see people engage that way and just share, hey, we're in separate spaces, but we're all here together. I also love the fact, I've been into conferences where they do like networking events where they do the same thing that you said, breakout sessions, and it's called Bring Your Own Happy. So for people who like cocktails, they can do cocktails or they can do mocktails, but they're smaller venues where the chat box is open, the conversations are open. You get broken out depending on your interests, and then it's just open for conversation. I do recommend a facilitator because sometimes you end up with a lot of people you don't know, and then it's a little awkward at the beginning until somebody starts talking. So prompt questions or a facilitator to start the conversation going, I found it's a lot useful than just kind of throwing people in a room, in a space.
Definitely, thank you, that's helpful. And I see Amy mentioned Whova again. Do you want to talk about what that is and how you're using that for networking and engagement, Amy?
Oh, sure. So it's a conference platform, but it works alongside, you can use basically anything like Zoom or GoToMeeting, but they do recommend Zoom. So we'll be getting our Zoom account. Our conference hasn't happened, but we did set up our Whova account. They're taking care of registration. You can engage with attendees before they can see who's going to be there. It's got a lot of neat features. But like I said, our conference hasn't quite happened yet. So, and there is a huge learning curve too, we're finding out.
That's good to know. So it's more of like a complement for some of these larger platforms.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's its own thing, but yeah, you need to have another account to go with it.
Gotcha. And is our meeting planner, event planner manager is Camille Abbey, and she's on the call, and she has chatted. Do you happen to know the cost for Whova, and if is it an actual conference app?
It is a conference app, so they have their own app that works with it as well as online. It was about $1,300 for our conference, and that'll give us for up to 500 attendees.
Nice, very nice. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, sure.
And Camille, do you want to talk about Guidebook and what we've used?
Sure. Yeah, we use Guidebook. We actually started using that based on some recommendations coming from the Rose Conference, and we started with them. We've used them for 2 conferences. The first one, we had a little bit more support, just kind of like, oh, it was our first year and building it out and all that. And then the second year, we had pretty decent downloads. I would say people downloaded it more than they necessarily engaged with it. And then we did it again the next year. We didn't really need to pay as much. I think the first year we spent, Danae, you can correct me if you remember, but I think it was like $3,000 something first year. And then the second year, it was like $5 per download. So we only spent like $1,500 or something. And so it was, and folks already had, they kind of had familiarity with it because it has been used in other MCH events. So that kind of helped as well. I hadn't looked at it as an opportunity since we already had a platform for registration, but that's why I was sort of curious about Whova, since you're also using it for registration purposes, but more for curiosity.
Thanks, Camille.
I have a question about the breakout sessions. You know how like when you go to like an actual conference, you have those people that want to go like in and out of different breakout sessions till they find the one that they feel like they're the most interested in. Or is that discouraged then on the virtual platform, or is that like not possible, or can people bounce around? I'm just curious what that looks like virtually.
That's really interesting. An interesting question. Not that it's an interesting thing. It is interesting, but it does happen. I think we all know. So I think, well, first let me ask the group, has anyone had experience with that? I really think it's about like how it's set up. So with the Collective Impact Forum, what they did was we had a general link to all plenary sessions which was Zoom webinar. And then we got an email the day of that listed the 4 or 5 breakout sessions. So I had access to go into any breakout I wanted at any time. I stuck to the one, but I did have access because they emailed it out, and the way it was set up, I didn't have to like pre-register for it. Or if I did have to pre-register for it, I still had the access to do that at any point during the day. And so technically I could have gone in and out of different breakouts. So I know for that conference, it was possible. And so I think if you're actually using Zoom to manage those breakouts, not different Zoom meeting rooms. So that's the key there. They had 5 different Zoom meeting rooms that allowed you to go and click on, whichever one. They didn't actually use, for example, this Zoom meeting that we're in right now. They didn't use the breakout room button to put people into their breakouts. Does that make sense?
A little bit.
There's an extra cost to that, right? Though.
Yes. Yes. And there's an extra cost to have multiple meeting rooms so that you can host multiple meetings at the same time. So our account right now, we just have the basic. We can't host 5 different breakouts in 5 different meeting rooms through Zoom. We'd have to use this one meeting room and use the breakout button to put you into groups.
And if you're using the breakout button, right, Danae, then the bouncing is not so much.
The bouncing is not possible, exactly.
We put you there based on what you've selected, and then you're there on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
does anyone have any other experience in different platforms that kind of allows people to come in and out?
Okay, so it looks like we don't have that experience.
So yeah, that's one way I noticed that the Collective Impact Forum managed that. They pay for multiple rooms so that they can run multiple meetings at the same time, and then they just provided that access to the entire attendee list.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the networking, what does that look like virtually? Because I know if there's like a chatter going on, somebody may have a question, but other people are kind of having side conversations, and then it's just scrolling down so fast. I mean, I think of like church, like you go to these, like the mega church online, and you put something in there, and then like 50 people say hallelujah, and like it's all lost in this long, like.
Totally.
Right?
So I would not recommend personally, as someone who has, managed a chat during a conference and someone who has been an attendee in a conference with a chat going, it's actually really hard to follow. And I probably would not recommend using that as your main avenue for networking. So we do a lot of virtual networking within USBC. We host our membership meetings virtually sometimes. And then we have work groups that come together and meet. I really enjoyed as an attendee, and I keep going back to the Collective Impact one because that's the only one I've been to so far this year. I really enjoyed them using their meeting room for the breakout, and then taking those folks in that one breakout and then using the breakout button and putting us into groups of 5 or 6 or 7. Now, the way you set that up in Zoom, you could have some registration questions that will help you sort people, or you could do it randomly, depending on what the focus is. So I wouldn't suggest the chat. I do think that's a lot going on, and it's probably not the best experience for an attendee. And so I would recommend using these groups. I know the guidebook app also allows for some connecting with attendees as well. So if you're planning on using a conference app, see what those options are within those conference apps as well. Anyone else have any experience? And it's totally okay if people love using the chat for networking. I'm just letting you know my experience. Jose, do you have any experience? I know you do lots of virtual conferences. Do your conferences have a networking component at all?
No, well, they're not. They're I guess they're seminars. They're day-long seminars that I do. And like 1 to 2 hours sometimes, depending on the topic. We don't have a virtual component to it. Not at this time. It is something that I've been trying to work into, but I don't have one at this time. I do have a question though. I'm gonna have to leave in about 2 minutes because I have a board meeting at 1. Is the recording going to be shared with us?
Yeah, we can definitely share the recording with participants. That's absolutely available. And what we plan to do, Miriam mentioned at the top of the call, we'll gather all the notes. She's going to go back and listen and kind of transcribe and pull out all of the lovely meat that's been served up here. And then the next call happens on September 4th. There are a bunch of people that want to get together as well. We're going to take all of that information and serve it up really nicely and share it out with the entire coalition's listserv. But the recordings we can definitely share with participants if you all are interested in that.
I have a question for what folks, this kind of, I think it kind of goes with networking, but also maybe into one of our other prompt questions, but is about connecting. I know, I think it was Lauren, I think you said you were going to be an exhibitor at an event and then you ended up not being, and I'm curious if you or if others have had experience as a vendor in this virtual space and how that was and how it was managed for you.
Yeah, so I was actually going to bring that up about, sponsorship, if we were going to talk at all about sponsorship, because that's obviously an important component too, and attracting vendors. And because we were in that role, I can tell you from a vendor role, we love the face-to-face. We miss the face-to-face, and it's different virtually. We still want to show our faces and show our products and have some of that virtual one-to-one time. So I think we're a little, we're not as apt to sign on to something where we're not going to have that. So there's some sponsorship things going on where it's like, your banner will be displayed in the background, or, your product will run like every, so many minutes, it'll flash on the screen. And honestly, we weren't as attracted to that. But when we had like little commercials, we thought they were so fun. And I think they spiced up the conference too. So if it was something where you're looking for sponsorship and looking to attract vendors, I think like having maybe like little mini commercials, maybe keeping it to like 30 seconds or under a minute would be a great way to kind of spice it up and also be able to attract sponsorship too.
That's really helpful. I had felt and wondered similarly whether like a pre-recorded commercial type thing or even a little talk at the top or at the header of some of the plenary sessions for kind of banner sponsor levels. Like, to me, those offer a lot of kind of impact versus a visual ad that you may have, you recognize the logo, but like it's not what's the brand doing now, that it could be exciting for the field and then cause some more of that connection afterwards. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
I think the sponsorship, like how much they're willing to pay is going to be a big difference. So for people that can't afford to pay a lot for it, they could have maybe like a banner or something that runs in the background every so often. But for those that want to pay the additional money and have that face time, I think there's going to be people that are definitely going to be willing to do that. And so then you can attract those bigger vendors at that event because of you know, more face-to-face time, or maybe there's a live component and that's different than a commercial, and you'll probably get a feel for like who's attracted to the live piece, who's attracted to just having a commercial.
Very
I'm
great.
also interested in looking into the idea of sort of like one-on-one connections. You know, that can be facilitated already through Guidebook and other apps. So we have, you know, that's not difficult, but you know, it's more to how to think about that in a virtual space. And I haven't experienced it yet in any of the events I've gone to. So I'm curious if other folks have been like making the connection direct, or just being like, you know, the vendor's here and you can find them easily on the Guidebook or the other apps.
Sylvia shared some bits about the ILCA conference. Sylvia, do you want to share what you shared in the chat, if you're able to?
Sure. It was really set up very nicely, because not only were they given our emails if we chose to get emails from them, but they sent emails to everybody that was in the virtual conference and had special offers, and had a chance to describe their products and that kind of thing. So it worked out, I thought, pretty nicely. That's something you'd have to get permission to share emails with the vendors, but it was very nice. And they had a section in breaks in between different sessions where they encouraged you to go to the vendors' booths, and you could go to their page and choose the vendors that you wanted to stop and see. So
nice. Thanks so much, Sylvia.
Great. So does anybody have any other questions? We can move on to communications. So for this one, we got a lot of, you know, kind of replies to the registration, questions about social media, outreach, promotion. What have you all seen and used for this section here?
Bye, Sylvia. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for joining us. So does anyone have any experience with social media, outreach, promotion regarding their virtual conference? And Camille, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we promoted Nbcc Reimagined, possibly?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things that, you know, as we all are learning into virtual spaces, one of the things that we're hearing a lot is really about the sort of early and often. I mean, you kind of do that anyway with any kind of an event, right? You talk about it as early as you can. If you can highlight your speakers and you know who they are, and earlier, letting folks know about them, having them engage with their, you know, their network is also very helpful, so that they're actually doing some of the social media promotion for your event via their followers and their own networks, folks who want to hear more from them. That's always very helpful. As far as Nbcc Reimagined, that has been, you know, we created a variety of graphics. So we had a graphic for each of the sessions that was the overall graphic. And then we had sub-graphic, you know, alternate graphics that had the, you know, the presenters and a little bit more about each of the presenters on those graphics. So some sessions had 3 presentations and then various presenters therein. And so the graphics were then shared out with the presenters themselves, so that they could also, again, share with their network, use them as they will. And then they're, you know, promoted on social media, as well as on our, you know, the platform page that we have, and in the wire, and in our weekly emails that we sent. You guys are like, yes, we know, we've seen them everywhere. But in all the things that we've been working on for National Breastfeeding Month. So yeah, you know, getting in your newsletter, in your email, on your social media, and with your presenters. That's kind of what we did for this one. And I'm sure there's other ideas out there as well.
Thanks, Camille. Anyone else have any ideas or things that have worked well for you?
Okay.
Anything else? Any questions? Anyone have any questions about things that have worked or things you're thinking about? Okay, we can move on to the next topic if everyone's okay.
Okay, so this topic was mentioned just a few times, continuing education. I know Jose had written something in the chat box about continuing education and something that he did to kind of keep people engaged and have attendee knowledge checks and tracking knowledge gain. So that was interesting. I hope we can hear from him if he can add some more of his insight there. But thinking about, you know, the different types of continuing education and applying for those and even working with partners, have you all had continuing education tied to your conferences, or what have your experiences been like?
I can just mention as a conference goer what I look for, and if that helps. So before I got my CLC, I'm a registered dietitian, so I'm always looking for CEUs. And so when I would go to these conferences, I wanted to see if I could apply the credits that I had spent for the whole day for that too. Sometimes they weren't addressed at all. And I think if it was addressed, and especially with the participants we could have, just even instruction on, like, you know, apply for this on your own, or this is how many contact hours it'd be super helpful. I mean, if you think of dietitians love to come to these, you know, obviously nurses, CLCs, dentists, physicians. I mean, they're all going to be attracted to this, but then they'll want to know, like, what does that look like for me when I submit for my profession? So if we address that, I think it attracts more people.
Does anybody else have a similar or different experience? Or are you at all interested in being able to provide continuing education? Is that something that you all have been looking into for your conferences?
We would like to include it in ours. I mean, we're just in talking phases at this point and throwing around ideas. That's why we're super excited to be a part of this today, is just to gather our own ideas too and share them. So, but we would like to have continuing education added on to our conference when we eventually do our state one in Pennsylvania.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you, we have done, God, how many? 9 conferences, 9 national breastfeeding conferences, and 80% of them did not have continuing education, 90%. We just started offering continuing education, and let me tell you, attendees love it. It's another way to increase revenue for your conference. And it will increase revenue in the sense of attracting more people to come, and in the sense of you can charge for continuing education. And so I would recommend looking into it, and looking into it early. See who you can partner with to provide those continuing education, so that it is not a financial burden for you. We have worked with partners to provide continuing education, and it has really been great. So you all have probably seen, we offered free continuing education for Nbcc Reimagined. It was not free in the sense of the lift for staff. I'm going to tell you that it's work. And so do look into it early if you're thinking of doing that. And although it's a lot of work, if you are charging for continuing education and hoping that your conference will be a large revenue stream, I would deeply consider it.
Definitely. And I would add to that kind of windows. If you think about, like you mentioned, CEUs are a really popular one. That one you do need at least a month of prior notice. So looking into that at least a month ahead of the dates. If you look more into CMEs for nurses and other physicians, we went through the CDC, which is free. They partner and provide those types of credits, but that one is more like a 6-month process. So definitely getting ahead of that is in everybody's interest, 100%. Mm-hmm. So if there's no other questions, we can move to the last topic here, which is funding, which we did talk about a little bit. So we have these just questions for you all. How have you funded your virtual conferences? Do you charge for your virtual conferences? And what expenses do you foresee? So I know we've talked a lot about different platforms, how much they all cost, different apps. We talked a little bit about sponsorship and having those kinds of funds for a conference, and even CEs, which were, a type of method of gaining funds. Is there anything else that you all have tried, or any other experiences that you all can share?
I'm curious to know, how are you all funding your conference? Do you have grants, or is it solely through registration? What are some of the things you've done in the past, and how are you translating that to virtual?
And you can also, just a reminder you can chat in the group chat if you prefer that method of sharing, and we can read out if that's a better system. But I also see that we're down to 8 participants. So if you all also don't have too much to share, just definitely let us know, and we can raise this question to a bigger group.
This is a really big question for us. And so we're super excited to hear feedback on this too.
Lauren, what have you done in the past? Just interested for your other conferences.
You mean as someone that's part of PABC, or as part of the company that I work with?
As part of PBC, that'd be interesting to hear. As part of the Breastfeeding Coalition, yeah.
So what we've been trying to do for, like, we haven't done really any virtual. We've been doing virtual meetings through COVID, but we haven't really done any virtual conferences. As far as like continuing education, we were trying to have like a guest speaker come at the end of our quarterly meetings and get in a contact hour or two. We've been trying that. Some people like to stick around for that, and some people have to go. So we always have it at the end of our meeting. And we talked about what that would look like virtually, because we're having a better attendance because people don't want to travel. Pennsylvania is a pretty big state. So we try to get it kind of centralized, but if we can't and not as many people can come, then they have that virtual component. And so we would like to do that at the end of our quarterly meetings virtually too.
Have you had, before pre-COVID, were you all having conferences at all, the coalition?
Yeah. A conference?
Yeah.
No, we haven't had, just meetings. No, we were talking about having a state conference. Gosh, I don't even know if we've ever, Gals that have been part of PABC way longer than me could probably answer that. I'm kind of new to it as of the past couple of years. But I know that we're talking about it. We're in talking stage now, so very early.
That's helpful to know. Monica, were you all doing conferences prior, or Renee? Were you doing conferences prior to COVID? Is the virtual conference kind of the first endeavor for you all? Sort of interested in what you all were doing, funding to fund your in-person events, and if you feel like some of those things are translatable.
Well, we were in Arizona. We were planning on doing a conference this September, and then when COVID hit, we had to basically stop the presses and try to refigure, and that's where we've been trying. So we decided to utilize we do a state meeting every other month to see what works and what platforms would work best. Right now we're using Zoom, and we have guest speakers, and so it's kind of like a hit and miss. Sometimes we get a guest speaker that understands Zoom and can, take the realm and do their PowerPoint, and then we have others that can't. So we're still in that limbo phase as what to do. And we were going to do our state meeting as well at the end of this year in December, but we decided to hold it instead in March as a year in review.
Gotcha.
So, and of course, funding is always an issue on anything. But we have noticed that we get more in attendance if we Zoom, and we get a bigger state representation, even from people in rural areas that we normally would never see. They have come to the table, or the virtual table, much more readily. So we kind of like this option to keep it as ongoing, to always do that, the state meetings that way, and maybe have once a year have a gathering.
I would say, I think, if no one else has anything to share yet, if we were venturing into conference land or gatherings for the first time, I would be kind of excited to start it in a virtual setting, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people sometimes don't make it to conferences because they just can't travel. And to be able to access something at the comfort of your own home is nice, is really nice. And as the conference holder, the holder of the space, I now don't have to budget as much because I don't have to find a location, a hotel, room blocks for staff. You don't have to pay for food. You don't have, there's just all these costs that come with an in-person event that you don't have to hold. And so it seems like it would be a real opportunity to maybe make some money and increase revenue for the organization. So one of the things, you can do is charge for your conference, charge a registration rate, so that you at least are covering the expenses for the platform, for example, right? So some of those platforms were like $1,300. You could potentially get a really nice platform based off of what you're charging for your registration. But making sure that's covered, those expenses that's really, I'm thinking about it, and Camille, correct me if I'm wrong, really the only thing you really need to cover is the platform space, it's virtual. And so it seems like an opportunity possibly to make some revenue for your coalition. And so I would definitely encourage to charge for your registration, look into the continuing education opportunity, charge for that, and try and increase the revenue that you all make for this fiscal year.
Have people found that speakers fees have gone down since everybody's doing virtual?
Mm-hmm.
Speakers are charging less, or are you finding speakers are just charging the same, you're just saving in the travel fees?
So we're about to start planning conferences, and we're not in the land of speakers yet. But has anyone else who has their conference kind of coming up soon?
This is Tricia in Vermont. I have not looked into the speaker costs to see if they are less. I suspect they may not be. The preparation time is all the same, but you are saving a tremendous amount on the hotel and the travel and all the expenses that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to second what we said before regarding the sending more staff, because I know that in the Vermont Department of Health WIC program with the NWA conference coming up, that we usually would send a couple of staff people to go to. Now that it's virtual, we're able to send many more staff.
Mm-hmm.
So you certainly can, expand your base and the people who've been exposed to your conference. I'm attending ILCA for the first time in many, many years because I didn't have to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even get to see it on the day of the conference. I'm so bummed I missed it. But I get to see the recorded sessions until I'm done. So a lot of benefits to going virtual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so do all you can to attract folks to your event. And Camille has shared some pieces in the chat even about it being even a more equitable approach, right? Because financially, some people just can't make it. And being able to now attract some of those other people that really may need to be at those spaces. So.
Yeah, and just pointing out that it's not like, sometimes in a hybrid model, like if you have an in-person, but then, we're sharing certain sessions online or remotely or things like that, it is let's just be honest, it's a lesser experience, right? If you know that there's people there in person and you're not, that's different than if everybody is at their somewhere, homes or wherever they may be, the experience is really optimized for them in the virtual space, and everyone has, assuming, and there is an assumption, assuming that your bandwidth, that Wi-Fi and internet access is working, and we know that is not true in all areas of this country, and it is a problem. But once that hurdle is cleared, the user experience is the same for everybody in the virtual space, and that's something I think that's pretty awesome.
Anyone else want to share anything about funding? Okay. Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of the call, and it is 3:25 Central Time. So we are doing awesome on time. And so thank you, everybody. We do want to remind you all that we will be sending, information your way. I can definitely send this recording to the participants today, along with maybe even some resources that were shared, and we will be kind of gathering more resources from the second call on September 4th, which is on Friday next week. Just before you all leave, we do have a link here for a survey. We are glad. It seems like everyone kind of enjoyed this call. Thank you all so much for sharing. And we do want to host more. So if you can all participate in this survey, and we will be sending it out in that follow-up email as well to those who had to go
before time, but to keep us, you know, engaged and see what else we can help you all with, and see how we can share with one another. So thank you. Did you want to add anything, Danae?
No, thanks so much. We learned so much from you all as well. So it's a learning opportunity for us. We're happy to continue to host space for you all to get together. And doing that survey will let us know how we can improve. So please fill that out. It should only take about 4 or 5 minutes at max. So we're looking forward to that feedback.
And Lauren, I do see your question. Should we be attending the future meeting too on the 4th? It's definitely not a requirement. We are going to compile all of the resources and share them to the field on the coalition's listserv. So if you can attend it, I'm thinking that it might be pretty similar to this meeting. Obviously, everybody's experience is different, and we might have people, you know, asking different types of questions. So if you want to, definitely up to you, but there's no need, because we will be sharing all the resources at the end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Nice meeting you all.
Soon. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.